Hi everybody, it's 314 React here. Today we're going to be looking at Dying Light 2 with an RTX 3090 and full graphical settings. Let's have a look what we got here. So DLSS quality, vertical synchronization is on. I don't think it's going to get above my refresh rate, to be honest, so I'm not going to worry about that too much. And the settings here are as follows: D3, D12, Ultimate, which involves ray tracing. I've got the field of view turned up. Anti-aliasing is at high, motion blur is at high, particles high. Sun shadows quality is at ray trace soft shadows. Contact shadows quality is at very high. Ambient occlusion is at ultra quality ray traced. Global illumination, same thing, ray traced. Reflections, ray traced. Ray trace flashlight, and fog quality is at high. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this runs, and I've managed to get the shadow play performance overlay to appear in the corner there by running the game in windowed, so we should be able to see the frame rate and general CPU utilization. I'm running a Core i7 6700K with 32 gigabytes of RAM. I do intend on upgrading the CPU soon, but you may see some very high CPU usage there. So I think the settings are so high at 4K, it's still going to be pretty GPU dependent. So here we are in the opening area of the game. We're getting some very Crysis 3 vibes here. As you can see there, CPU utilization is about 25% and the GPU is maxed out at 99%, and we're running at 43 frames a second. So at least in this area, bit of a hitch there, at least in this area, it seems to be GPU bound. Relatively good because, yeah, I don't want my CPU holding things back too much. But I guess in more intense areas, this CPU will probably become a bit more of a bottleneck. I think I've noticed from Digital Foundry's videos that if you have DLSS on and you look at the grass, oh no, there used to be, I've seen on the Digital Foundry version, I think probably the review version, the grass would start to blur if it was left on for too long. I am using the DLL that was included with the game, so it's running whatever version of DLSS this ships with. And in future I will upgrade that DLL, link in the description of how to do that. But overall, yeah, this looks amazing. This looks really good. The only thing is that this game doesn't ship with HDR, and so it is just kind of coming out at the normal luminance range. Although I do have a HDR monitor. It would be even better if it was in HDR, but I don't know why they haven't done that. So yeah, very much Crysis 3 sort of vibes, which makes you realise just how good Crysis 3 still looks. So yeah, the parkour is very smooth, just as I've seen in all the reviews. Wow. 34 frames a second there, 33, 34 frames a second.
Yeah, right. Seriously, I wish I had as much energy.
Let's see if we can turn off the ray tracing in game without having to restart it. So I'm going to turn all the ray tracing options to their rasterized settings, and we're going to see how different this scene looks. So yeah, there we are. This is with the standard rasterized settings, and oh, it does not look anywhere near as good. I mean, look at the difference there. And it's taken us up to 75 frames a second. So, yeah, the ray tracing is the big hit here, which isn't a surprise, let's face it. But DLSS, keeping that frame rate relatively good. I mean, 30 is not a good frame rate, I know. But for how good this looks, it's 4K. As long as I'm upgrading my CPU and stuff, I'll probably be getting a 4090 this year as well. So I imagine the 4090 will be able to do this at 60 frames. So I'm not too bothered. Usually, frame rate's important to me, but usually when a game looks this good and it's this new, I can kind of handle 30 to 40 frames, so I'm not too worried about that. Let's switch the ray tracing back on. So let's turn DLSS off and see what happens when we're not using NVIDIA's machine learning magic. Okie dokie, so we got 18 frames a second. Yeah, basically double the frame rate it gives you with DLSS on, which is about what we expect. This game is very similar, at least in this area, in style to Horizon Zero Dawn. And I think they've done a DLSS analysis on that. I won't be doing it this video for this game, but I may do in future. And already I can just tell it doesn't look as good with native 4K. The only thing I think may look better is some of the ray tracing aspects, because right now all the ray counts will be hitting, I think the ray counts will be like set to 4K. When you're running DLSS, the internal resolution is lower, which I think lowers the ray counts. But overall, yeah, all the A-list edges and things won't look as good in native as they do with DLSS. You may as well switch DLSS on. So let's switch that back on. Yep, and there we go, doubles that frame rate right up. I imagine setting it to balance will take you up to about 38. I imagine performance will take you to about 45, and I imagine ultra performance may get you to 50. That's just a ballpark guess. My god, this looks phenomenal though. This looks almost photoreal. And yeah, this is the global illumination, this is reflections, this is shadowing, this is almost, if not matched up to Metro Exodus's level of ray tracing. Although I think this game still does have some rasterized old school stuff left in it, like point lights and things like that. And obviously neither of those are purely path traced or ray traced like Quake 2 RTX. And also the voice actor of this guy here he was in Crysis 2 and he was at the very beginning as well. So this is giving me some real Crysis vibes. Oh my god, look at that. Look at that. Why is this not in HDR? Why is HDR support not out the door? But HDR would level it up. I mean, yeah, the shadowing would be, like, the level of shadowing, the lighting would be amazing. The colours on the trees there would be incredible. Oh, you see, even usually in previous eras, such as Crysis 3, when it came out in 2013, even in areas that looked amazing, you still had aliasing issues because you were using FXAA, SMAA, TXAA, something like that, and you'd still have like blur and you'd still have pixelation and aliasing issues. Whereas now with DLSS 2, it's almost a flawless image. So especially in areas like this where it's, you know, lots of foliage, lots of potential for aliasing issues, and looking close to the screen, I'm just not really seeing any. It just looks really amazing. Looks like some of these trees in the distance might be fakes, like 2D trees until you get close. This is the kind of thing where in the future UE5 will allow you to use Nanite. Because at the moment you'd have like a tree that's in the distance with a lower model and a few different polygonal variants of that, and you switch between them the closer you get to them. Whereas with UE5's Nanite, you'd have a super high res or a super high polygon tree that you just take details from, stream the polygons from that, and depending on the resolution, how close you are to it, it will define the model based on your resolution. So you wouldn't notice that pop in. I'll put a link in the description that explains it better than that. It still looks really good though. I wonder what game engine this runs on. Is it Techland's? Is that the in-house one? Yeah, it runs on the C engine, so that'll be their own internal thing, which is very impressive. You can see there the ray trace reflections, everything above it, and you can see your character being reflected there. This is the area I was really interested in getting into, and we're finally here. Ooh, look at that flat texture work though. Oh, that's a bit of a letdown. Come on. Come on! Crysis 2 solved that ages ago. You could have tessellated those bricks, or at least put some parallax occlusion mapping on them. See, that's where it kind of breaks down a bit. It's like, wow, it looks so amazing and photorealistic, and then, oh, it's just flat bricks. That's a bit of a letdown. That's a bit of a nitpick, but even if you look at the ground here, like these bricks, at least what looks like at least has a normal map applied to them, so they look like they have depth. And again, this area here would look amazing with HDR. So a couple of minor complaints. The HDR should really just be default by now. I'll put a link in the description to Digital Foundry's video. I think they go into a lot more detail about what the ray tracing does and the extra detail that it adds, as well as some good comparisons. Just trying to see if my reflection is in that bottle. I don't think it is. Yeah, it's not running too bad at all. I imagine with a 3080 with DLSS 2 on, you'd get probably a little bit less, like 30 FPS outdoors and about 40 indoors. So it's not, you know, it's not 60, but I think it's still playable. If you got the ability to, I'd definitely recommend using ray tracing, because it is a way of wow, this is a bit grim. It is a way of getting that visual fidelity up to a much more realistic level. Jeez, this is grim.
That's heartbreaking.
There's nothing like a party to celebrate the end of the world.
They died on their own terms.
Let's hope we get that lucky too. I'll see what's upstairs. You check out the garden, okay?
Okay.
Man, just look at that global illumination. Oh, here goes some water. Here we go. So you can see there, immediately, you can see a screen space reflections, because it's reflecting some of these leaves up here. But I imagine as we get closer, that'll be taken over by some proper ray tracing, hopefully. Well, it's kind of hard to tell. So yeah, it's definitely a hybridized approach, which makes sense, as you'd imagine. Yeah, look, you can see that wall there disappearing off screen. So that, in fact, that is all screen space in the water there. Still looks very impressive though. Let's have a look in the settings here. Reflections, ray traced. So we're still at the point where ray tracing is quite difficult to run with current hardware, so there still has to be sort of trade-offs. Because if you were to fully ray trace or path trace this to like Quake 2 levels, then you end up with like 10 FPS or something, even with DLSS on. There's a good example of some ray trace reflections here. You can see the character's silhouette there, and the light behind him being reflected. So here we see some of the more hybridized approach coming in, similar to Metro Exodus again. Some of the stuff there is available off screen. You can see it off screen, which means it is ray tracing because you can kind of see the rays there, that kind of grainy ray look. So I think, yeah, you've got ray tracing for probably some of the major geometry, and then for the rest of it, like the trees, it's filled out with screen space. I imagine that's because reflecting all of those trees with ray tracing on all this water would be quite impactful to the performance. And again, haven't seen my CPU kick up too much, but the GPU has been pretty much maxed out. Definitely GPU limited, even on my older CPU, at least in these points. It'd be interesting to see what it's like later on in the game, in the cities and stuff. See, these bricks look really good. Like, they've got actual depth to them. Interesting. See, having played through Metro Exodus with HDR on, I know how good these areas would look with HDR. So they should really hurry up and put HDR in it. This looks really good though. This area as well really shows off how that ray tracing handles the lighting. Much less light bleed. In fact, let's turn the ray tracing off and see what happens. Yep, much higher frame rate, but that lighting just doesn't look as good at all. Let's turn it back on. Yeah, way better. So here's a really good example. We'll finish the video here. This is when the sun is setting. It's heading towards nighttime. You can see the really nice looking shadowing there and lighting. Really incredible. Again, 43 FPS there. Haven't dipped below 30 yet, I don't think, so it's looking pretty good. If we turn all the ray tracing goodness off, I mean, it looks like it's gone a generation back. It looks really flat and horrible. You do get higher frame rate, like 75 frames, but I would happily settle for 30-40 frames if it looked like this, which it does. And we're at 43 frames a second, as I say there. So yeah, you do need quite a beefy card. I imagine you could turn some settings down to medium, balance things out. Again, I'll put a link in the description to Digital Foundry's video. They go over some optimized settings for 2060s, 2080s, 3060s, 3070s, that kind of thing. But if you're running a 3080 or a 3090, or one of the TI versions of them, just max out those settings and go for it, because this looks incredible. Please do leave a like and a comment. Let me know what you think. If you want to see any more of this or any comparisons with DLSS or whatever, do let me know. Stay safe, and I will see you in the next video.